Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Our learning this morning is sponsored by Hannah and Robert Klein in memory of Mrs. Sarah Braun, Zichrono Livracha, mother of Rebbe and Tara Rosenbaum. Thank you very much to the Kleins. Okay, picking up with chapter 14, verse 23. We're discussing the mitzvah of Maaser Sheni, and that is that one of the different tithes that's taken. In certain years, there's a mitzvah to take a tenth of one's produce and bring it to Yerushalayim and eat the food in Yerushalayim. Now, it might be difficult to bring all their produce to Yerushalayim. Depends how close you are. It depends how much produce it is. It depends the nature of the produce. But the Torah also tells us halacha that you can one may transfer the sanctity from the produce onto coins and then bring the coins. Say it's easier to bring money with you somewhere than to bring pineapples. So then one brings the coins to Yerushalayim, and in Yerushalayim one buys food and one partakes of that food. So even though that food was not actually the Maaser Sheni money, because it's purchased with the money upon which the sanctity of Maaser Sheni was transferred, it's like it's the Maaser Sheni. So you eat that food in Yerushalayim. But in any event, the Torah here is talking about that mitzvah, verse 23. You should eat of it. You should eat it before Hashem your God in the place that He chooses to for His name to reside there. The different tithes, so that you learn to have reverence for Hashem your God all the days. Now, this sounds like a lovely mitzvah, but why is it that this mitzvah of eating food in Yerushalayim will teach you to have reverence for God? What does one have to do with the other? So we'll start with the Rashbam, which we don't normally study, but I did come across something. I came across it before you shared this with me, but my father did share this with the Rashbam with me also. Rashbam and Pasuk Chav Gimel Leman Tilmad Lira Kishetira Makom Shchina Ukohanim Bavodas Mulvim B'Duchanam V'Yisrael B'Ma'amadam. When you see the sanctity of the Beis HaMikdash, this is an amazing thing to think about. Basically, what the Rashbam is saying is the Torah is giving you a mitzvah that compels you to come to Yerushalayim and experience it. And if you experience Yerushalayim, again, we think it's nice to go to Yerushalayim. We ain't seen nothing yet. The Beis HaMikdash and the Korbanos and the Kohanim and the Levim all doing their things. That experience in and of itself will bring a person closer to God, will bring a greater reverence for God. That's what the Rashbam says. He has an interesting take as well. The Sforno says, we know the halacha that the Sanhedrin, the grand rabbinic court, was located right next to Beis HaMikdash, which means that if you're going to Yerushalayim, possibly even the Beis HaMikdash itself, for things having to do with your different sacred items, you will have the opportunity to look in on the Sanhedrin and see them operate and see the figures who man the Sanhedrin. And now, are you obligated to go look at the Sanhedrin? No, but the hope is that, again, through the circumstance of going, you'll be moved in that way. It's an interesting. These are both interesting perspectives on the mitzvah. Okay, moving on now to chapter 15, verse 7. Moving on to chapter 15, verse 7, a very famous pasuk. When there is among you an impoverished person, from among your brothers in one of your gates, in your land, which Hashem your God gives to you, don't harden your heart, and don't close your hand from your impoverished brother. Verse 8, you should open your hand to him. And you should lend to him. It's the famous idea that the highest form of tzedakah is a loan. And then you also have a famous phrase here, that which he's missing. And that's a remarkable halacha that we learn. The measure of tzedakah is whatever the person is missing. So for one person, it could be that he can't afford a loaf of bread. And for another person, it could be that he's come on hard times and he no longer can afford his payments for his Lexus. And but for him, That's de machsoro. Now, obviously, the person who needs the bread is a higher priority than the person who needs the Lexus. In other words, it's not that we ignore level of need, but the point is, de machsoro teaches us that it's all called tzedakah. So a person, thank God, a person doesn't know anybody who needs bread, but a person does know someone who can't keep up with a lifestyle that we would consider luxurious. And they have a question: is this called wasteful tzedakah spending? It's not wasteful tzedakah spending. For this person, it's de machsoro. It's a very interesting thing to think about. I remember I once was this was many years ago, before I was unfortunately before I knew of greater needs for charity. But I once was trying to collect some money for someone, not in a rabbinic capacity, just sort of a community kind of thing. I was once starting to collect money for someone, and I approached a certain individual, and the person said, "I wish I could afford that. I wish I could do what you're collecting for." But truth be told, that's not a reason to say no. If you can't afford to give tzedakah, then don't give tzedakah. If you've got more pressing needs to give to them, by all means give to them. But the fact that you're contributing so that someone will be able to do something that you yourself aren't able to do, but for that person, it might be de machsoro. So that's just an interesting thing to think about. I also want to point out in verse 7 that surely many of you know the halacha, and if not, we discussed it on the recent Ask the Rabbi about tzedakah, different aspects of the hierarchy. So it mentions from among your brothers, and from there we learn, I mean, Rashi gets into more detail, but from there we learn that there's a greater mitzvah tzedakah to your family than to your friends or neighbors. It talks about from among your gates. From there we learn that the poor of your city have priority of the poor of other communities. So they're interesting things. But none of those things are what I had in mind when I noted this pasuk. And what I had in mind is the beginning of verse 7, Ki yeh b'cho avyon, when there is among you an impoverished person. Well, of course, the impoverished person is among you. If the impoverished person wasn't among you, you wouldn't know about it. So why does it say in you? You could say all kind of things, but there's a very interesting Orach Chaim on this pasuk. Orach Chaim on pasuk Zayin, Ki yeh b'cho avyon, Omro v'cha, Ulai sheniskavin lirmos ma'amaram zal. Maybe, says Orach Chaim, the intent of the language of in you is to allude to the following: Sha'amru, kitam shebocher Hashem liyaser la'adam ba'olam hazeh biyisurei ha'onihu kidei shebe'emtza'uso yizke chavera ha'mefarnaso. It's a fascinating statement about Baba Basra. The Gemara Baba Basra says, the reason why this person is afflicted by poverty is to give you an opportunity to give tzedakah. Now, that's an oversimplification. God has all kinds of calculations and all kinds of cheshbonos, reasons for all kinds of situations. So it doesn't, on its face, that implies that there's no reason why the person should be poor. It's just all your fault that the person is poor. I don't think it's that simple, but the point of Baba Basra is still a very powerful thing. What's the natural reaction? The natural reaction is you see a person who comes to you for money. We, generally speaking, are guilty of this. It's just such a fine group of people. Maybe you aren't guilty of it. Most people are guilty of it. You say to yourself, why do you need money? What's wrong with you? Why can't you get it together? Now, is it possible that the person is at fault for not having money? Of course, it's possible the person is at fault for not having money. But we all know, I think, people who have financial difficulties who are extremely capable, extremely hardworking, and it just happens. So the Gemara Baba Basra teaches that there's a fundamental value in people needing charity, because it gives the people who have the money an appropriate means to spend their money on, an appropriate context to spend their money, excuse me. So says the Orach Chaim, maybe that's what the pasuk is hinting to. When there is in you an impoverished person, meaning not just there's an impoverished person down the block, but maybe the reason there is an impoverished person is to give you the opportunity. you need this opportunity. It's a whole different way of, the normal way we look at it is, oh gosh, this person is poor. Who knows why they're poor? Oh, will I help them? Will I not help them? Maybe they're poor because I'm supposed to give my money to somebody. We don't know. So it's a whole different perspective. Okay. Something tells me that in all of my father's years soliciting funds, he never used that angle. That's my guess. But it is a very powerful idea. Okay, verse 11. By the way, just in light of this, let's just read verse 10. Nason titain lo, give the person the money. V'lo yira levavcha b'sitcha lo. Don't have an ill heart about him when you give him the money. Ki biglal hadavar hazeh yivarecha Hashem lokecha. Because of this, God is blessing you. The reason why God is giving you financial success is so that you can do good things with the money that he grants you. This is your chance. Don't sit here begrudging this person, and don't think of yourself as any better than this person because you have money and he doesn't. There's a lot of people better than you who don't have money. Maybe this person is one of them. Verse 11. Ki lo yachtal evyon mikarev haaretz. Literally translated, this pasuk seems to say that a poor person will never be removed from the land. Meaning, sounds like there's always going to be poor people. Therefore, I command you, saying, open your hand to your brother, to your poor, to the impoverished person in your land. Okay, let's see the Ramban on pasuk Yud Aleph. Ki lo yechdal evyon mikarev haaretz. Harbe mefarshim amru shelo yechdal ha'evyon mikarev haaretz be'echad mikol hazmanim. Many mefarshim explain that what it means is that at all times there's going to be a poor person. Ki liolam ye'evyon ba'aretz. Because there's always going to be poor people. So this is a halachic tension here, because elsewhere in the Torah it says that if you keep the mitzvos, if all of you keep the mitzvos, nobody will be impoverished. So how can it say that there, and here it say there's always going to be poor people? So many of the Mefarshim say the Torah is telling you Klal Yisrael is never going to be up to that level. It's just not going to happen. So there's always going to be poor people. It's an interesting shot, a little bit depressing. We will talk more about this tomorrow, God willing, because the Ramban actually doesn't agree. So we will pick this up tomorrow. But just to sum up, we spoke about the Rashbam and the Sforno regarding why coming to Yerushalayim with the Meister Sheni will teach a person to have reverence for God. We spoke about different aspects of Los Tzedakah. We spoke about the Orach Chaim in terms of that when there's in you a poor person. And we began discussing the meaning of the pasuk that the poor will never be removed from the land.